Well, our weather guys have been warning us for days that this could potentially be a very serious situation, maybe catastrophic. So we knew that something was going to happen. Our chief meteorologist, Mark Weinberg, is not one to mince words, and he said it's going to be bad. So we were standing by waiting for whatever was going to happen. We knew that Henryville was going to be somewhere in the path. Didn't know exactly where. So I was assigned to go to Henryville and just wait, see what was going to happen. We didn't know if the storm would strike before I got there or what was going to happen. We were just told to go. So photographer John Hunter and I drove to Henryville, got to the exit, and well, you can ask and I'll tell you what happened from there. But we got to Henryville not knowing quite what to expect.
About what time was this?
Oh gosh, it was in the late afternoon. I'm thinking it was around 3 or 4. I don't remember the exact time, but it was. We got there before the storm hit.
And you were monitoring the warnings and all that.
Right. As I said, we knew that it was going to hit in that area, and it was going to be bad, but we didn't know exactly where or how bad. When photographer John Hunter and I got to Henryville exit, we had a choice. We could get off the exit, go right into the Shell station, or go left into the Marathon station. We decided let's just go right to the Shell station. It was right at the top of the hill, and we'll just stay there and see what happens. Shortly after we arrived, within seconds, a man who I still don't know who it was, knocked on the door of our live truck. We had a live truck with us. A man knocked on the door of the truck and said, "You guys need to take cover, it's coming now." And I looked over my left shoulder through the window and saw it coming in the distance, saw the twister coming. So John Hunter and I, the photographer, got out and I said, "John, just roll on the whole thing." So he rolled his camera as the storm approached, the tornado approached, and as we made our way into the service station, we went inside. There were several people there. We became fast friends very quickly. And we waited. We sat there waiting. We were prepared to go into a freezer if we had to, because that provided the best security and safety. And we watched as the storm approached. It was coming right toward us. The building started to shake. The lights went out. And we were preparing for the worst. We were preparing to move, if we had to, into that freezer to take shelter. And as the storm approached, we watched it turn. As I was watching it come, it turned to my right, jumped across the street, hit the Shell station we were in with a glancing blow, skipped across the street, hit that Marathon station across the street dead on, flattened it totally. And we just waited for a few minutes to see what would happen next. After a few minutes, we went out and saw where it had hit the gas pumps at the Shell station where we were. But across the street was total devastation. It had wrecked that Marathon station. It had plowed into an apartment complex. I ran into a man who had run across the street who was bleeding. It was just an awful scene. And as I look back, we had a choice to turn right into that Shell station or left into that Marathon. If we turned left, we'd have been hit by that storm and probably buried under rubble. So by God's grace, we made the right choice and moved into the Shell station, and that's where we watched this thing as it came in. I was preparing to do a telephone report back to the station because we couldn't get our live truck operating in the amidst of the debris, and the cell phone signal was in and out. I was able to get a connection, and I was talking to our meteorologist, Mark Weinberg, about what I'd just seen, and he said, take shelter again. Now there's hail coming. So we went back into the Shell station, into the gas station, and just huge softball size hailstones started coming down. And that was about as frightening as the tornado was, because it was hitting the windows. We just knew the windows were going to smash. They didn't. The hail passed, and we were able to go out again and start taping what we were seeing, both at the Shell station and then across the street to the Marathon station and the apartment complex. And it was just total devastation. I have been in the business of news a long time and had never seen what I saw that day. Buildings destroyed, smashed totally, people walking around as if in a daze. First responders were arriving, and none of us were sure if there were still people trapped in that apartment complex or in the gas station. So the first responders did a great job. They got there right away, started pulling people out of the rubble. I ran into one woman who was frantic because she couldn't find her children. And as we were there, the first responders found her children alive. From there, it was just a matter of telling the story of what was going on in Henryville. As I said, I'd never seen anything like it.
What did it sound like? What did it look like? What's
The storm itself, the twister was big. In my view, I've never seen one that close and never hope to again. But the thing I recall most was being in that gas station, and just the violent shaking of the building. We thought it was going to be ripped apart, but it remained intact, and the lights went out. And people talk about that freight train sound. I didn't hear that. It was just noise, lots of noise, the building shaking, and people screaming, and then going out and just seeing all the devastation was just incredible. I've never seen anything like it.
So you got the remote truck up and running, and you were able to send pictures back. And
Actually, no. Well, the truck, we could get it running. The trouble is, the cell phone service was out, so I could not call the station and tell them that, one, we were okay, and two, that we could do a live shot. So I had no communication with the station. They didn't know whether we were alive or dead for a while. In fact, they sent another crew up there to look for us because we could not communicate with them. So John Hunter and I decided, after we had shot as much as we could shoot in that area, that we would just get in the truck and go back toward Louisville. And the truck was heavily damaged, the windshield was smashed, so it was like driving in open air. But we made it back to Louisville and got what we shot on the air, and I went on the air talking about what we had seen and experienced, and they showed the video of the storm coming in, and I had gone to cover a story and had become part of it.
from the story, right? And now, was there a second tornado that kind of came through? Was that what was with the hail?
Yeah, that was part of the hail. I did not see that tornado, but that is what that hailstorm is about. That hailstorm that came through was part of that second tornado that came in. So I did not see that twister, but I experienced the hail. Mm-hmm. Well, they couldn't have kept me away from that story, because that experience had made me part of Henryville. So I was there every day for several weeks practically, covering first the devastation, the recovery operation, which then became a rebuilding operation. And to this day, I feel like, Henryville is where I need to be to chronicle for our viewers how this community has come back from that storm. It's been remarkable. I've met lots of great people who have shown great resiliency and how they've come back from this major disaster and put their lives back together.
What's one story that you can think of that touched you the most personally of the people that you met?
Gosh, there's so many. I won't use names because I can't even recall names right now, but there was one woman outside Marysville, Indiana, not far from Henryville, who lost her grandfather and her son in that storm. And I interviewed her several times, and I'm just amazed at, how she is able to, to this day, be affected by that, but continue to function, continue to live her life and move on, despite losing 2 members of her family and her house in that storm. But there are stories like that all over the Henryville area. People, I was struck most by the people who came to help. From all over southern Indiana, and then Louisville, but then from all over the country, all over the world, people coming in to help in that recovery, and still to this day. That struck me as much as anything else, is just how much people wanted to help.
So,
And of course, there's a Stephanie Decker story about her losing her legs. That was a huge part of the story. I tell you, the person that I probably became closest to, because I've covered him quite a bit since the storm and the recovery, is the principal of Henryville High School. He has done a remarkable job of first overseeing the rebuilding of that school, and he has developed a passion now for helping others recover as well. I traveled with him to Oklahoma after the storm hit Moore, Oklahoma, and watched him and his family minister to other people and give them advice about how to recover from something like this. So he's a pretty remarkable person. When you are a reporter, you train yourself not to, when you're a reporter, you train yourself to watch from a distance. You don't get personally involved in stories. You try to detach yourself from stories. But in this particular case, it was impossible. I was attached to Henryville. That became part of me. So it was one of the few stories where I've actually been able to personally be involved, become a part of what they've experienced, what they're talking about, and get involved in the lives of people there, because I went through it with them. So now I know where they're coming from. So in a way that changed me, because you don't usually get involved in stories personally. I was always a person of faith, so that didn't change, but I became very grateful that the Lord led me to turn right instead of turn left, or it could have been a much different story for me and my photographer. I've asked people that question myself, particularly the residents of Henryville. And to a person they said, in a strange sort of way, the storm may have been good because it really brought the community together. They weren't just individuals now living in their own individual lives. They became part of a larger community, and they became a part of a larger Kentuckiana, a larger country, and a world, because the world literally came to help them. So they really began to really feel connected to each other and to other people. So I think the town has changed that way. I think people are probably more appreciative of each other, more grateful for what they have, and have found out within themselves just how much they can take and how much they can move forward and recover. And it's given them a strength and a connectedness to each other, I think.
what would you want people, if a reporter is doing a story, say 50 years from now, on what in the world happened back in 2012, what would you want them to focus on? What would you want them to remember?
I think a couple of things. One, as I mentioned, the resilience of the people, how they could experience something like this and come out, I think, even better than they were before. So that's one thing, the strength of the people, the resilience of the people, but also the willingness of people to help. I was just amazed, and we always think of the first responders, and they were the first on the scene. But pretty soon you had people from all over the world coming to Henryville to do whatever they could. And I think without that outside help, the recovery, the rebuilding would have been much more difficult. So I think those two things. One, the strength of the people of Henryville and the surrounding area, southern Indiana, and also the willingness of people to come and help when help is needed.
Have you remained friends with the people in the gas station?
Many of them aren't there anymore. Whenever I go to Henryville, I try to stop there and see if there's anybody there. But those who were, the few who were remaining who were there that night, yeah, sure. We don't know each other by name, but I see their faces, and we know we've been through an experience together.
Anything else you'd like to say about anything?
I would emphasize what I said before. When you're a journalist, you don't become personally involved in the story. You generally try to remain detached. But in this case, I became part of the story. I became part of Henryville, and Henryville became part of me. As we experienced something together, I was able to tell literally the world what was going on there, but at the same time remain attached to the people in that community because we experienced it together. So those two things, I think.
Would you mind sort of saying that sentence over for me again and substituting Southern Indiana for Henryville?
Sure, sure.
That's always a sensitive one. It comes over the hook.
Yeah, and that's part of the story. We focus on Henryville, but there's Marysville and all other parts of Indiana, this part of Indiana that was affected by this. When you are a journalist, you train yourself to remain detached from the stories that you're covering, not to be personally involved, to report what was going on. And in this case, it was impossible for me because I became part of this huge disaster in southern Indiana. I became part of it, and it became part of me. So I could not stand detached in this case and report what was going on. I experienced it with them, and that is a unique experience in my life as a journalist. And I think I'll always have a piece of this community with me as long as I live.